In a remote part of the city stood an old hospital, abandoned and shrouded in the darkness of oblivion. The buildings were dilapidated, windows shattered, and shadows filled the dark corridors. Legends of horrifying experiments conducted there were passed down through generations. It was said that the hospital was closed after a terrible secret was revealed. The doctor, who had performed cruel experiments on patients, was found dead in his own office, and his victims vanished without a trace. One day, a group of teenagers, Mike, Lisa, Emma, Nick, and Jack, decided to spend the night in this ominous hospital. They were convinced that all the ghost stories were mere fiction. With flashlights and cameras, they entered through a broken door, determined to prove that the fears were unfounded. Inside, the hospital looked like a scene from a nightmare. Mold and dirt covered the walls, and the empty wards were full of rusty instruments and broken furniture. Moonlight streamed through the shattered windows, casting strange shadows on the floor. The teenagers headed to the operating room, where they found old journals and documents covered in dust. From them, they learned that Dr. Rogoff, who once ran the institution, conducted inhumane experiments, exploring the possibilities of extending life on the edge of torture. The patients suffered terrible agonies, and it seemed that no one survived these experiments. As the teenagers read the horrifying records, a crackling sound echoed as if something heavy had fallen to the floor. They froze, listening to the silence that followed. Emma, the most impressionable, suggested investigating, but the others decided to stay put. At midnight, strange sounds began to be heard in the building, like someone scratching the walls and the floor. Gradually, the sounds grew louder, and the air filled with sinister whispers. Nick, deciding to check the source of the noise, walked down the corridor, illuminating the way with his flashlight. He stumbled upon an old laboratory where rusty tools and chairs loomed in the darkness. Suddenly, his flashlight revealed a terrifying scene. Bloody traces led to an old operating table, scattered with old medical supplies covered in blood. Returning, Nick was met with a hoarse whisper, "You are here inside the room." The teenagers noticed that the shadows on the walls began to come to life, then took on the form of a man. It was the ghost of Dr. Rogoff, his face distorted with horror and malice. Darkness burned in his eyes, and his hands were covered in blood and marks from the tortures. Mike, trying to calm the others, suggested finding an exit, but they soon realized all the doors were blocked. Panic seized them as screams began to echo throughout the building, tearing through the night. Each scream resembled an hysterical cry of pain. Lisa, desperately searching for a way out, encountered the ghost of the doctor, who blocked her path. In his hand was a rusty scalpel, stained with old blood. He grabbed her, and her screams echoed through the corridors. Nick was next to disappear, his flashlight falling and leaving only darkness. His scream was the last sound his friends heard. Emma and Jack, left alone, tried to find a safe place, but soon realized they were no longer alone. Ghosts, the dead patients distorted by their suffering, began to emerge from the shadows. Their eyes glowed menacingly, and their hands reached out as if begging for help. Emma, gripped by panic, ran to the operating room, hoping it would be safer. But her hope was unfounded. Inside, she saw the old operating tables and medical instruments starting to move on their own. Blood on the floor began to form eerie patterns, and the shadows on the walls seemed alive. The ghost of the doctor, covered in blood with a mad look in his eyes, stood before her. Jack, trying to save Emma, burst into the operating room but was met with a horrifying scene. Dr. Rogoff stood over Emma, her body tied to the operating table, cutting her with a knife, leaving trails of blood. In her screams and groans, Emma vanished, replaced by a new ghost. At that moment, Jack saw the door to the operating room beginning to close by itself. He tried to break free, but was grabbed by the ghosts, who dragged him into the darkness. In the last moment, he saw Dr. Rogoff reaching out to him and uttering words he would never forget. "Now you are my patients forever." The next morning, when the police arrived in response to a call, they found the hospital empty. All attempts to find the teenagers were unsuccessful. The only things they discovered were bloodstains and old medical instruments covered in gruesome marks. Since then, no one dared to enter the ominous building. It is said that the souls of those trapped by Dr. Rogoff still wander the corridors, their screams and whispers breaking the silence, and new victims can hear the words, "Now you are my patients forever."